It's lovely to see you all. A really warm welcome to London Buddhist Centre. My name's Danayutta. We've got just under an hour together. So it just really helped me just to know who's in the room. So is there anyone for whom it's the first time to the London Buddhist Centre? Okay, so just a couple of people. And then everyone else has been here before, yeah? And most of you, I guess, won't have meditated before, yeah? Okay, good. It's slightly uncomfortable for me, like giving a talk in this light. I just wanted to say that because basically all of you are backlit. So all your faces are in shadow. So if I'm staring at you, sorry, I'm trying to like work out what expression is on your face. Not because you're making faces at me, but just because I can't really quite see all of you. Yeah. I don't quite know what will help, but anyway. Never mind. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk for a bit and then there'll be space for questions at the end. I'm not terribly good at being interrupted, so if you do have a burning question, just try to sit on it until I finish. I promise I won't take too long. I do really, really like questions, but I also tend to lose my place as well, so I thought I'd just say that at the start. I've been asked to talk about kindness, and particularly living with kindness. Actually, all the talks come from a series of books that we have in our bookshop. I thought I'd just sort of show you the Living with Kindness book. So this is the book, Living with Kindness, on which is basically a commentary of a very, very key basic text that is in the Buddhist tradition. Yes, do come on in. Come on in. Yeah, there's a chair at the back, there's cushions in front as well. Yeah. And I just wanted to say right up front that when we're talking about kindness in Buddhism, usually what we're talking about is metta. And metta is M-E-T-T-A. It's a Pali word. Pali is a sort of ancient Buddhist language. Metta is what is usually translated to English as kindness. But I thought I'd say a little bit about what metta is because I think it is slightly different from kindness. So if any of you speak a language that's not English, you'll know that there's some things that just are not quite translatable in its full sense. Yeah? So metta, its usual definition is it's a response. It's a response of care and compassion that one has when you encounter or even think about another living being. Yeah? So it's a response of care and compassion, an unbiased response of care and compassion when you encounter or even think about another living being. So that's what metta is. That's the kind of flavor of kindness that we're talking about. And I thought it's quite important to remember that it's unbiased. So the kindness that we're trying to live with, the kindness that we're trying to develop, is it's not the kindness that picks and chooses. So we're kind to the people who we like, and unkind to the people who we don't like. It's not that kind of picking and choosing kindness. It's a kindness that's beyond our preferences. So beyond whether we like them or we don't like them, and it's also a kindness that's beyond prejudice. So it doesn't matter whether we agree with their politics, or we agree with their views, or we disagree with their views, or we disagree with their politics. It's a kindness that goes beyond that. And it's a kindness that one develops to all beings, including ourselves. So when we teach the kindness practice, the metta bhavana, the development of loving kindness practice, we always start with ourselves. But I just wanted to say something about the slight nuance of talking about kindness. Because usually these days, kindness in the English language has a sort of connotation of pity. So, we talk about being kind to homeless people, or basically being kind to people who are less fortunate than ourselves. That's usually the term, the sort of situations in which we use the term kindness. But just going back to this thing about not picking and choosing, kindness that we're trying to develop is for everyone. So usually, your mom wouldn't say to you, you've got to be kind to your sister. because they're really successful. Or, you have to be really kind to Donald Trump because he's got all the power in America. People wouldn't usually tell you that. But actually the kindness that we are trying to develop is beyond whether sort of status of the person receiving the kindness, or even our status in a way. Yeah. So it's not that kind of pitying kindness. And also I think sometimes kindness can sort of tend towards feeling slightly arm's length. Yes, it's almost like kindness is something that we extend to people to slightly keep ourselves apart from them. Yeah. But it's not that. Actually, the kindness that we're trying to develop, metta, it's passionate. And one of the sort of traditional similes for metta is that metta glows, it shines, it blazes forth, like the sun. Yeah, so metta like the sun. It glows, it shines, it blazes forth. So it's a hot, passionate response of care and compassion. It's definitely not arm's length, and it's definitely not lukewarm. Yeah? And also, I think sometimes, kindness, sometimes we can slightly mistake kindness for sentimentality. Again, this thing of like kindness slightly keeping us apart. Sometimes we kid ourselves. I mean, I know that I do this for myself, that, we have a friend who's doing something that is not good. I don't know what your friends do that are not good, but I can think of like my friends, falling in love with somebody that they shouldn't really be falling in love with because they're in a relationship, or my friend's in a relationship, that sort of thing. And you know that it would probably be good to have a straightforward, direct conversation with them, but you just can't do it, and you can't give the excuse of, well, I just don't want to upset them, or I don't want to make a big deal out of it. And it's not that kind of slightly hiding from the truth kind of kindness. Actually, sometimes kindness can be quite, it needs actually to be quite direct, quite robust. So kindness is not just soft and fluffy. It also can be direct and robust. Okay. So one last thing about the problem with kindness, and then I'll move on to actually practicing kindness. Another thing I thought that we need to be a little bit aware of is this thing of being kind to oneself. So one of my jobs here at the London Buddhist Center is I teach yoga to people who come here at the Buddhist Center, and I run the yoga program here. And sometimes I definitely notice that people come to yoga for a bit of me time as a way to be kind to themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that, and it's not that kindness excludes that. And it would be a real shame if that's where it stopped. Yeah. So kindness or compassion towards oneself might include going to the spa and doing nice things like that. And also, it can be much, much more. I was thinking just for myself, I think one of the things that I need to work on more for myself in terms of kindness towards myself is just to stop holding grudges. Because when I hold on to a grudge, or when I sort of go over arguments with different people in my head, what's actually happening is I'm sort of hurting myself again. I'm sort of recreating that sense of injustice and suffering and victimhood again for myself. But somehow, I seem to quite like doing that. It's sort of something happens that's not very good, and I want to tell all my friends about it. Every time I meet up with somebody for lunch, I feel oh yeah, do you know what happened? And then they said this, and then I'm oh my god, I was so hurt, and blah, blah, blah. And actually, probably what I need to do is not just in relationship to my friends, but also just in the privacy of my own mind. I just need to stop rehearsing those arguments, stop telling myself all the bad things that I've done or other people have done to me. And actually, that would be a much, much kinder thing to do. Or the essentially kind thing to do, rather than trying to work out how I'm going to work a massage into my busy week. Yeah? Okay. So kindness, metta, has primarily three aspects. And I thought in the sort of middle part of this talk I could say something briefly about the three aspects of metta, which is that it's emotional, it's volitional, and it's mental cognitive. Kind of like quite sort of technical words, but I thought maybe we should just start with emotional. And by emotion, I just sort of mean feeling. And I think kindness definitely starts by empathizing with people. It starts by sort of being able to empathize with ourselves, sort of really notice that actually we're hurt or other people are hurt, or really empathizing with people in their situation. And I just wanted to make the point that it's not that we put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. That's a good start. But actually what we probably need to do more is not just put ourselves in their shoes, with our kind of views and our kind of thoughts and our kind of personality. It's almost like we need to step into other people's lives, really sort of take into account their conditions, their upbringing, the sort of life that they've lived up till that point, and understand why they're acting in particular ways. Yeah. And actually, when one is able to do that, what we notice is actually that people are just doing the best they can. Sometimes if you say, "Oh, just try to put myself in their shoes," and I just can't understand why, probably you haven't quite gone far enough. You need to put yourself in their shoes when they were a little toddler, before they were wearing shoes, and then sort of look at their whole life, live their whole life, and then you might understand them a little bit more. If we do that, then it's more likely that we will be moved. Yeah. So a lot of trying to empathize or trying to be emotionally kind is just removing the barriers that we put up around our hearts. And also just to say, don't worry if you come to the Buddhist center and you learn the loving kindness practice and nothing seems to happen. You don't sort of feel good about yourself, or you don't sort of feel mushy other people do. Some of us just have emotional thermostats that are set differently. So I don't particularly feel all loving, and I don't know, I hope this is not a pejorative way of putting it, but I don't usually feel all rainbow and unicorns at the end of a metta bhavana session. But what I do notice is when I do practice the metta bhavana consistently, I act differently. So although I don't very often have this big, wide, open-hearted moments, I notice that I act like that after a session of the metta bhavana, or consistent sessions of the metta bhavana. So the kindness that we're trying to bring into being has a volitional aspect. It must be sort of lived out. If kindness is just an idea, it's probably not quite kindness as it needs to be. Yeah, there's probably a bit of sentimentality in there. So what we need to do is to act with kindness. And when I say act with kindness, I think what I mean is really acting with our well-being in mind and other people's well-being in mind. In Buddhism, it's quite interesting actually. There's no concept of sin. There's no concept of sin. There's no concept of good and evil in a particular sort of way. But how one's ethics are sort of are conceived, I guess, is about whether or not an action is skillful or unskillful. And the primary thing to understand here is that skillful action brings about freedom and joy, not just for yourself, but also for everyone in the situation. And actions that are unskillful, unhelpful, bring about suffering, not just for yourself, but also other people. Yeah? I think we do need to be a little bit careful because I think these days the zeitgeist is about a certain kind of humanism where we're sort of encouraged to sort of do what feels good. Yeah, it's quite prevalent in society, this idea that we should just do what feels good. But there are problems with that because there are some actions that feel great, but they aren't skillful and they definitely don't lead to freedom. Yeah? And there are also some actions that feel uncomfortable, but they're actually very, very good, very, very skillful. Yeah? I was just thinking about like before I sort of started practicing Buddhism seriously, one of the things that I used to I feel really embarrassed, and I think about it for days and days and days after, is about wearing the wrong clothes. I don't know if anyone ever has felt this embarrassment of going to the party or a party and realizing that you're overdressed or you're underdressed. Maybe like, I mean, you might not feel this, but like, you might not feel so self-conscious, but I definitely did. And I would think about this for ages and ages afterwards. And sort of like, in a particular sort of way, give myself quite a hard time for being overdressed or being underdressed. But actually in Buddhism, it's completely ethically neutral. You don't have to worry about that, you know. Don't worry about what you wore. And then, just thinking about actions that they feel good in the moment. One of the things that I can be prone to, these days not so much actually, but the sense of righteous indignation? It's like righteous indignation of like, you just know that you're right and they're wrong. And actually going on about righteous indignation can feel extremely pleasurable. You sort of like rehearse all the reasons why you're right and you just keep going on about it and it feels great in the moment. But actually it's just a form of ill will. It's just a form of hatred really. It might be quite like a small form of it, but it is a form of just actually being quite unkind to whoever it is or whatever situation you're indignant about. Yeah? But it can feel quite good in the moment. And then there are also acts that feel really, really excruciatingly uncomfortable, but are very skillful. And the sort of classic one is apologizing. When you've done something wrong and you have to apologize, but usually you just want to run away. And sometimes you might even think, actually, it was just a small thing. I don't need to apologize. But if you do, that's where freedom lies. Yeah, that's where freedom lies. I was thinking, actually, this probably happens most in families. It probably happens most in families, in a family situation. You just sort of think, like, but they love me, so they'll understand that I'm just like this, so I just don't need to say sorry. But actually, if you can own up, it won't just be good for you or good for the other person, but probably it will bring a deepening of the relationship. Yeah? So apologizing and apology is very, very skillful. There's this woman called Jerry Larkin who used to run a Zen center in Detroit, and she used to run a seminary. And she said that in her Buddhist seminary, the students that she knew would last a long time were the ones who she could see were able to apologize. Like the students who couldn't sort of like last the year-long seminary were the ones who weren't able to actually apologize. Yeah, so apology is actually a really important part of spiritual life. Okay, so not just our emotions need to be kind or our actions need to be kind, we also need to sort of really look at our mind and really look at the cognitive aspects of kindness. That's okay. Don't worry. aspect of kindness is a sort of transformation of an inner reorientation towards other regardingness. I guess in Buddhism, what we would say is that the main cause of suffering is that we see ourselves at the center of the world. In a certain sort of way, it's not really our fault. We just somehow mistake that we're the center of the world. If you think about it rationally, you just think, well, of course I don't think of myself at the center of the world. But we just all seem to act like that. Yeah, we all seem to act like that. And it's not just that we think that we're the center of the world, center of the universe, but that we're essentially independent, that we don't really understand the effect that we have on other people, and also we don't really understand the effect that other people have on us. And Buddhism would say that all that is a mistake, yeah? The sense of being sort of existentially independent and existentially at the center of the universe. And because we forget that, we act selfishly. So really what kindness means in a cognitive and wisdom and mental aspect is just this inner reorientation where we just really, really deeply understand that we're completely interconnected and we're not the center of the world. We're definitely not the center of the world. And you could even say that the path towards egolessness, the path towards this sense of attenuation of one's ego, is just to every day be less and less selfish. Yeah? Just every day, a little bit less selfish every day. So what we need to do, just to work in this emotional, volitional, and cognitive on the three aspects of living more kindly, living more in line with metta, is to really look at our mind, and you can do that through meditation. Really practice the metta bhavana, really practice extending loving kindness outwards. And also we need to act, and we need to practice acting with kindness. And then I guess for most people it would mean doing that as part of a spiritual community, and doing that as part of a supportive community actually, where everyone is practicing. And most of us aren't really able to do it by ourselves. Now we like to think that we are, but actually we are very, very much affected by the people around us. Way after I started coming to the Buddhist Center and getting really serious about training for ordination, I went back to working in the city for a year. And my husband teases me a bit about this, because that year where I went back to the city, he said I swore a lot. It's just but I don't think of myself as a very sweary person, but I think I was just around bankers who were just swearing all the time, and it just sort of became like a wallpaper, and I just sort of don't quite notice it. But that is what happened. We think that we're able to rise above our context, but actually probably most of us aren't. So we do really need to be practicing with other people who are practicing kindness. Okay, so just coming to the end, I thought I'd just tell you a little story just to wrap up my talk, and then we'll just have a little discussion if you're interested. And it's a story from the Buddha's life, and it's a story actually towards the end of his life. So just in case you're new, Buddhism is just over 2,500 years old. As far as we can tell, there was a man who became the Buddha, became the enlightened one, became the awakened one. The word Buddha is a bit of an epithet, and it's quite interesting. We don't actually even know the Buddha's name. He's got different epithets like Siddhartha, We know his clan name, which is Gautama, but we don't actually know his personal name. But as far as we can tell from the canonical literature, there was a man who actually lived, and he seemed to have founded a religion and had many, many followers. He had many followers, and some of them led a more sort of ascetic, monastic life, but he also had many followers who were lay people. He sort of started his ministry around the age of 40, so he had this particular experience which we call in Buddhism the enlightenment experience. So it was around 40, and he died at about 80 years old. So he had about 40 years of going around teaching people, and it seems that he just used to walk around India, sort of across northern India. He used to just walk from village to village, from area to area, teaching, and he seemed to have many followers. And towards the end of his life, he did a little walking tour. He knew that he was dying, and he did a little walking tour, and he ended up in this quite a small sort of village place in Kushilnagar, I think it's called. But actually, for most of that 40 years of his life, he also had an attendant. And the story that I want to tell you is just about this little thing that happened between him and his attendant towards the end of his life. So his attendant was a cousin of his called Ananda. And Ananda was something a bit like a secretary. So he would sort of organize the Buddha's diary. So people would want to come every time they went to a village. Certain people would want to have interviews with the Buddha. They might come as individuals, might come as groups. People would invite him to have a meal in their homes. And Ananda seemed a bit like a secretary, so he would organize the Buddha's sort of social diary. And he was a bit of a link between people and the Buddha. But he was also the Buddha's companion, so he was much, much more than a secretary. He went everywhere with the Buddha, slept in the same places, walked everywhere with the Buddha. So he was also a bit like a friend, also a bit like, I guess, like a butler in a way. And there was this very, very interesting episode towards the end of the Buddha's life. And what happened was the Buddha arrived at this place. He knew he was going to die. He said to Ananda, "This is where I'm going to die." And what happened was, as they stayed in this place, lots and lots and lots of the Buddha's followers started congregating. They heard that the Buddha was going to die, and they all started congregating in this place. And it seems that some time in that timeline of events, Ananda left the Buddha's side. And in the canon, it said that he was leaning against the lintel of against a doorway of a hut. Yeah? It's kind of such exquisite detail. He's leaning against a doorway of a hut. Ananda is crying, and he's so upset, he's distraught. And what he says, it's recorded what he says, that Ananda says, "The Buddha is dying, he who was so kind to me." So it's quite interesting, you can say so many things about the Buddha, that he's infinitely wise, that he's conquered death, he's conquered hatred. You could say that he's an amazing teacher. He has so many followers. He even had followers who were kings, and sort of like whole kingdoms of followers. But what Ananda says, "He who was so kind to me is dying." And my teacher, Sangharakshita, says that all of Buddhism is contained in that sentence. All of Buddhism is contained in that sentence. But I just want to go a little bit further as well and just say that actually, what then happened was that the Buddha heard, somebody must have said to the Buddha, oh, like Ananda's really, really upset. He's, crying by this hut. And the Buddha says, call Ananda to me. Call Ananda to me. So Ananda gets escorted back to the Buddha. And the Buddha kind of like scolds Ananda. He says, Ananda, haven't I taught you that all things come to an end? Yeah. And this is the teaching of impermanence. Ananda, haven't I taught you that all things come to an end? He slightly scolds Ananda on his deathbed, and then he just proceeds to talk about all of Ananda's good qualities. Yeah. So he just all says what a good attendant Ananda was, what a good sort of organizer Ananda was, and how much people loved Ananda. These kind of people loved Ananda because of this, that kind of people loved Ananda because of that. So this is at the heart of Buddhism, this mutual love and respect. So you could say all sorts of things about Buddhism, that it's about freedom, it's about conquering death, and all that and all that. And at the heart of it, it's about human relationships and being loving and kind to each other.